YouTube, what's up? Back again for another daily fishing video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Happy Saturday, you guys. I hope y'all enjoyed yesterday's video about mid-depth finesse cranking. One thing that I've started getting on my comments is y'all tell me the type of video that y'all want to see, and I actually had a subscriber ask a particular question, and I'm going to address that question today. We're going to talk a little bit about how to catch bass when the current is turned off. So if you've ever fished the Tennessee River, or if you've ever fished a body of water where current is a major factor, when that current's slack and where there's no moving water, those fish tend to change. And that's what we're going to talk about today. A few of my favorite baits and how to approach fishing that type of condition. I hope you enjoy this video. If you haven't yet, hit that sub button in the bottom right hand corner. I greatly would appreciate it. Comment below what is your favorite non-current bait for fishing ledges or fishing out deep. I hope y'all enjoy this video, and I'll see you here in just a second. Alright guys, today's video is talking about fishing the Tennessee River when there is no current. And I'm not saying like just a little bit of current, not like 50,000 cubic feet per second. I'm talking about like no current, less than 10,000 cubic feet per second. So it's almost non-existent completely. In the summertime, one thing that I'm going to kind of backtrack for a second. In the summertime, you're going to start seeing a bunch of guys posting on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, all these different social platforms, pictures of fish, schools of fish that are set up on targets, you know, whether it's a point, a ridge, a ledge, whatever it may be. And they're all dotted up and everything looks perfect. Well, when the current is not running, those dots are not all in a perfect line. They're not all perfect, and they're all kind of scattered. Not only that, but the fishing gets extremely tough. You know, it's not just a day of going out there with a deep diving crankbait and catching 100, or, you know, picking up a big flutter spoon and catching 50 fish or whatever it may be. The fishing gets really hard, and those fish get really, really hard to trigger. But I do have a couple things that I like to do. First off, live scopes kind of change the game on all of that. So I know exactly what depth these fish are suspending at. I can kind of see them sitting out there floating up off the bottom. I can target them exactly to the depth that they're sitting in. But to do that, you got to have really specific baits. You know, when I'm using my live scope and I'm trying to target fish that maybe are suspending, especially on the TVA, there's only one bait that really comes to mind, and that's a NEKO rig. So a wacky rig, but with the hook vertical and the weight on the bottom. This is a big time rig for fishing those suspended fish because it has a slow fall. You know, one thing that I do to manipulate that is, depending on the depth of water I'm fishing or just how suspended these fish are, I'll, you know, increase or lessen my weight based off of that situation. So if there is more, you know, if they're more towards the bottom, I can use a heavier weight to get it down there. If they're sitting higher up off the water or off the bottom, that's when I'm going to use that lighter NEKO weight. I'm going to let that bait kind of float down right in front of them. A lot of times that initial fall is where it's going to happen. If they do happen to chase it down, just kind of keep your line tight and barely shake it. Now there's actually 3 other baits that I really use out there on ledges beyond just the NEKO rig. The drop shot. Guys, a drop shot is absolutely killer. But in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but I really believe line size makes a huge difference, especially in the situation of no current on ledges. You know, worm size, I still keep it to about a 6-inch worm, especially when you're dealing with the TVA and places like that. That little bit longer worm, I mean, you're dealing with bigger fish. So it's not like you're trying to finesse 12 inches or 14 inches. You're trying to catch 3+ pounders. So having that little bit longer worm isn't going to hurt you. You know, and as far as leader length goes, I get a lot of questions as far as leader length. Do I use a long or short? And I keep it really simple for you. If I'm less than 10 foot of water, I'll use a leader about 6 inches long. If I'm deeper, I'll use a longer leader. And the more I cast my drop shot, in which in the TVA situation, I'm casting it most times, I'm going to use even longer leader, because if you think about it, if I'm using it vertical and I drop my bait directly into the boat and it's a, well, let's say a 6-inch leader, my bait's going to be sitting right up here when my weight's down here. Well, when you cast it and you're at that angle of your line coming in, your bait's now here and your weight's here, so it's only technically about 4 inches off the bottom. So the longer the leader you have between the weight and the worm, the longer you can cast the bait and still keep it up off the bottom to target those suspended fish. That's a big trick for you guys that may not have drop shotted much or may not have casted a drop shot much. That's definitely one of the tricks that I use that I'm going to catch a lot of bass with. Another one of the techniques that I use is going down to a shaky head. You know, you hear a lot of guys talking about shaky heads on the TVA and how it's effective, but most of the time they're talking about the big, huge, like shaky heads, like the 5/8, 1 ounce heads with a big 7-inch or 8-inch or 9-inch bull worm. They're real big, fat mag trick worms, those kind of things. But what I'm talking about is actually finessing down to an actual finesse worm, something that's compact, 6 inches long, but really tiny in diameter and only about a 1/4 ounce weight. I'm throwing all of these techniques on a spinning rod too, if that helps you a little bit. When it comes to the TVA, summertime, hot, and no current, you gotta downsize, guys. You gotta downsize your line. You gotta downsize your bait offering, and you gotta finesse them up. Like, it makes a humongous difference if you finesse these fish, especially the fish that are used to seeing 10XDs, 6XDs, hair jigs, big 6 and 8-inch swim baits, and all that. If you finesse them, you'll be surprised how good a day you can have on those really tough days. Now, last but not least, this is one that not everybody talks about. It's definitely one I probably shouldn't talk about. But when it comes to TVA ledges, and especially with no current, I really like a Ned rig. But not your traditional Ned rig, not your just little tiny worm with a little 1/10 or 1/8 ounce jig head. I'm going to actually upsize my worm. So I'll get a 5-inch Ocho, okay? And I'm going to take about 1 inch to 1.5 inches off. So it's still going to be considerably long. I mean, it's about 3.5 to 4 inches long. And I want that worm to be a little bit longer. I'm going to actually upsize my weight to either a 3/16 ounce jig head or a 1/4 ounce jig head, Ned rig jig head. Still used it on real light line, like 7-8 pound test, something like that. Especially 8-pound Strike King Tour grade fluorocarbon. That's definitely been my go-to as of late. But downsizing that line and dragging, and when I say dragging, I mean like dead slow dragging that Ned rig around. Something about having that little bit upsized Ned rig, especially in a little bit deeper water. You know, this is one question I get as far as Ned rigs go. I get a lot of guys that say, hey man, I really like to throw a Ned rig, but I don't want to go out there and fish it a 3-inch worm or 2 3/4 inch worm out there in 20 foot of water, and I can't say I blame you. The only time I will go with a really small Ned rig worm out deep is if the water is gin clear. Lake Mead, some of these places that have a lot of spotted bass, I definitely will change to that real small worm. But in the cases of these, you know, dirtier lakes, you know, more stained lakes that you can see only down about a foot to 3 foot, and I know these fish are sitting in 20, that little 2 3/4 inch worm is going to get lost. Like, they're not going to be able to find it as easy. Having that little bit of upsized worm is definitely going to help them find that worm a little better. It's going to eliminate them getting lost in the bottom with it. So that's one thing that I do. I definitely upsize that worm. You're going to see a lot more success if you do that. Guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. It's a quick breakdown of a few of my finesse tactics that I use when I'm targeting those fish on those TVA ledges with no current. If y'all have not yet, though, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Super simple. You have to have a Gmail account, but hit that sub button and comment below what is your #1 no current TVA bait. I'd love to hear what it is. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.